In today's video, I thought that it would be a pretty neat idea to compare Canadian schools and Polish schools, seeing as the school year has just started. Hi, and welcome back to Rosy Learning. If you're new here, my name is Ruja, and I'm an English teacher here in Poland, though I come from Canada. And I would love for you to check me out on my Facebook and Instagram account. The links are below. And of course, subscribe here on YouTube because I'm just getting started with all these videos, which I think will be interesting. Bear in mind, though, that this is going to be taken directly from my own experience of going both to Canadian schools and to Polish schools. So if anything's different than your own experience, feel free to share that with me. Now, what I wanted to start with was what kind of also inspired me to do this video. I found my agenda from 8th grade. So this is like a calendar that we could buy at school. Inside, I mean, you get lots of room to write down everything you need to do in a given week, and room to also write your class schedule. This is my authentic class schedule from that year, which is like 2003, 2004. Yeah. And at the very back here is also a map of Canada and the national anthem in English and in French. I'm just showing this because it was so cool to find it. But the things that I wanted to talk about were, first of all, the first thing I wanted to compare was what age you start school at. So in Canada, you actually go to school a year earlier than you do in Poland. I remember when I was 5 years old, I just couldn't wait to go to school, and I only had to wait one more year because I started school when I was around 6 years old. Whereas in Poland, you start when you're 7, though there was this experiment a few years ago where parents could decide if they wanted to send their kids to school a year earlier. Though this idea in general was not very popular, I don't think that lots of people are for their kids going to school earlier. So this had its repercussions in that when I moved to Poland, I basically had to repeat a grade so that I could go to class with other kids my age. The next thing I wanted to say was that I remember this quite vividly. In Canada, I would always, just before school, I would ride my bike to school every day to see if the class lists would be hanging on the glass doors of our school, because they would inform you of your teacher for the next year and of your classmates as well, because every year we got mixed up. This was for us to get to know all of our peers, not only the ones in our class. So every year we would get mixed up, and this idea, I guess, had its ups and downs. But I remember that it was quite traumatic if your best friend wasn't in the same class as you, and you know, it could be hard on a kid. But yeah, I remember riding my bike and every day just waiting to get that information, just to see if I'm going to be in the same class with Maya, Lucy, and all of my friends. Number 3, I guess, is maybe a little bit strange for Polish people because, well, this isn't done in Poland, and it would come off as being kind of nationalistic. In Canada, before every day at school, we would have to stand up and sing the national anthem, which would also be played through the PA system. And it would be either in English or in French. And I remember that I had no clue what I was singing in French. I mean, I guessed that it meant more or less the same as the English version, but I basically just sang from memory and from the sounds of the words. I didn't really know what words I was singing, you know? But every day you would sing, "Oh Canada, our home and native land." Let me just look at the text. Protégera nos foyers et nos droits. Yes, so that's something that we actually did every single day before school. Number 4, in Canada, there was a number of days that were off for students, and that would include days such as snow days, which basically were days where we had some unexpected snowfall and a lot of it. And so we would listen on to the radio in the morning, listening for the name of our school to be listed among the other schools that were closed due to the snowfall. And if it were closed, that would mean that it would be too dangerous to commute to school by bus or by car. So you could stay at home. What you did though was put on all of your clothes, like layers of clothes, you know, snow pants, balaclava, coats and everything, gloves, of course, and spend the whole day outside in the snow. So a bit of a paradox, but we loved those days. And it could snow quite a bit in Canada. Another thing that's interesting is that we also had half days, which is self-explanatory. I mean, you'd only go to school for half of a day. I don't know why, what it's connected to or with, but we just didn't go to school for the rest of the day, just for half of it. And another thing would be PA days, which I never really knew what that stood for, but I checked just now. And PA days are professional activity days for teachers. So it would be kind of a day for them to develop their teaching skills or whatever. They would have some workshops, and so the school would be open for them but closed for students. So you would have a day off, which is what really counts, right? So that was interesting. I mean, in Poland you do have some days off as well, but I never heard of a snow day or a half day, so that's interesting. Number 5, I remember that I really loved singing in a school choir, and all the schools I went to always had a school choir, so I would always join that. And I remember that I really loved my music teacher, Mrs. Weber from Laurelwood Public School, because that's what I'm talking about right now, especially. You would have multiple even school choirs, depending on the amount of students that were willing to sing in a choir. And usually we had choir practice, like I think at least once a week during lunch break. And we would prepare lots of concerts, and I remember I couldn't wait to get into 7th or 8th grade because the 7th and 8th graders got to sing my favorite Christmas song, which was Carol of the Bells. I just loved how all of the voices came together, and I couldn't wait to be able to sing that myself, not just listen. So when I moved to Poland, I was devastated to find out that Polish schools don't have choirs. At least not the ones I went to. If I hadn't found Clemencianum, which is a church choir, I would have died, I think, of not being able to sing with anybody. So it's great that at least we have church choirs here in Poland. But yeah. This brings me to my next point, which is that in Canada, students are encouraged to do more projects at school. So in every subject, basically, you would always have at least one project to do during the semester, big project. Lots of hands-on things to do. So you kind of got to learn in that way. Whereas in Poland, I feel like it's very much, there's just a teacher telling you what you need to know and the textbook, so you just read and copy or repeat back to the teacher what she or he said, which is not very creative, unfortunately. So I really missed having projects, and especially in subjects such as music or art, where in music in Canada you got to learn how to play instruments, make up your own songs. Art, we also like made stamps and other things during those lessons, whereas here in Poland we had this one subject called sztuka, which combined both music and art. And basically what we did was just learn the biography of famous musicians and just learned the theory of certain instruments. We never really got to learn how to play any. And art was just making a Christmas card or something. So it was not very original, and I really missed that when I moved to Poland. The next thing I wanted to mention, number 7, I believe, is that I also already talked a little bit about this in my previous video. In Canada, every day at school begins and ends at the same time. From what I read of my class schedule, every day began at 8:44 and finished at 2:55 p.m. And interestingly enough, I didn't really remember this, but according to my class schedule, each lesson lasted 37 minutes. And there were no breaks between lessons except for 2 times during the day. Once at around 10 o'clock, you had a 15-minute break, and then a 1-hour lunch break, during which you could either go home or eat at the cafeteria. And afterwards, you would have time to play or go to choir practice, for example, or whatever else you had planned for that time. Okay, so that's that. Number 8. In Canada, and I'm talking about elementary school because I only ever went to elementary school in Canada, we had no set books. I believe that in high school you do start having to read some obligatory books, but in elementary school, it's about just encouraging you to read in general, anything that interests you. No set books. Whereas in Poland, you do have to read the obligatory books that are on some kind of list or in the curriculum. And I remember that that was pretty hard on me when I moved to Poland. The first book that I had to read was Sisyfowe prace, and I remember that I had no idea what I was reading. Like, for example, there was this sentence that przynosisz hańbę naszej rodzinie, and I had no idea if that was a good thing or a bad thing. Like, what does hańba mean? And one of the other first set books that I had to read was Pan Tadeusz, which is a very long, very hard to read epic poem that I don't think anyone understands, let alone a Canadian girl with Polish roots who's just moved to Poland and doesn't really know how to express herself too well and has a lot of catching up to do in general. So that was pretty hard on me. And one of the first things that I also had to do in Polish during our Polish lessons was to memorize Oda do Młodości, which is a 2-page long poem, again by Adam Mickiewicz, who's a very famous Polish poet. And I had no clue what it was about. I didn't know like at least 80% of the words, and to recite it then in front of the whole class. I did it somehow, but those were hard days, definitely. Anyway, number 9, so we're almost done here. In Canada, at the end of each semester, you would get your report card. The grades were from A to D, where A is the highest grade, D is like the lowest passing grade, because if you didn't pass, you would get an F or an R. F for failure, R for I don't know what, but it would mean that you failed. Later on, when you got to like 7th and 8th grade, your grade would be a percentage. So like 80% or something. Okay, this is going to be a long video, but hopefully it's interesting. Last thing, guys. The last thing is not really connected with Canadian public schools or Polish schools in Poland. It's connected with my experience of being a Canadian with Polish roots in Poland. So every kid that has Polish roots and Polish parents in Canada goes to Polish school on Saturdays. And I just wanted to mention this because it's maybe something that you don't really you haven't heard of in Poland. So normally from Monday to Friday, I would go to my regular Canadian school, which was either public or Catholic. And on Saturdays, I would have to go to Polish school, which lasted, I think, around 3 hours, and during which I would have to learn Polish, the language, the spelling, the history, geography, culture in general. You know, it's called Polonia. So this whole Polish community would just gather and cultivate the culture, their Polish culture and their heritage, and pass it down onto their children who otherwise would not have really had the opportunity to get to know more about Poland. So I guess it makes sense. It was interesting, though I don't think I was overly excited about going to school also on a Saturday. But it was different. It wasn't so hard. I mean, I don't even know if we got grades there, and basically we kind of learned the same things over and over every year, so it wasn't very demanding, but it helped. It helped to continue your tradition, right? And to get to know other families that were also Polish. So there was this whole community thing going on. Okay, that's it, I think. Those were all of the things I wanted to mention in this video. There are still a few things that I have up my sleeve, and maybe you have other questions or remarks concerning what I've already said. So if you have anything to say about this video, if you've liked it, feel free to like it, to subscribe like I said. Check me out on my Facebook and Instagram account, and I look forward to hearing what you have to say about Polish schools versus Canadian schools, or maybe other schools from anywhere else around the world. Thank you, and that's it. So have a great time at school, and yeah, see you soon in my next video. Thank you, and bye!